We're live in Tel Aviv with Dan Perry, who's the former top editor for the Associated Press for the Middle East. And, Dan, I think you and I were speaking in the days leading up to what ended up being Operation Midnight Hammer. I have it on the tablet. We'll pop it up here timeline-wise. And remember, the conversation then was about whether there would be a week or maybe 2 weeks in the president's timeline. Instead, it all happened very quickly here over the weekend. This is the period that we're in now, to Kelly's point, with those bombers returning to Missouri. So your impression from Tel Aviv, I know you weren't a huge fan of putting 2 weeks out there. It turns out it was more like 2 days.
Yeah, I warned against it and said that dragging this out risks a mass casualty event that could bring about unwanted and unplanned escalation. But, even then, I believe on your show, I was suspecting that it might be a decoy and a misdirection. And indeed it was. So that's good. But what happens now is a little unfortunately in the hands of Iran. And I think the president and the vice president and other spokespersons have made clear that the U.S. is willing to ramp up its involvement, but also to move immediately to negotiations. And the Iranians have their own equation about honor and the way things appear to their public and in the region. So I suspect they'll feel they have to do something. But if that something is muted, I think we could end up seeing a ramping down of this operation fairly soon. And then the interesting thing will be to what degree the Americans come to the table with an attempt to dictate terms of surrender and with an ultimatum to a series of things that I think the world, much of the world, wants of Iran. And it isn't just the handing over of whatever enriched uranium they have, but also probably an end to their ballistic missile program and especially disavowal of any further effort to guide and arm and train and fund proxy militias around the region that have undermined the sovereignty of a stunning swath of Arab countries, something that should never have been accepted. And I think if the regime feels that the only way that they can avoid such damage, that their survival is actually in question, is to do this, then maybe a deal's in the offing. And one thing I would point out is that Trump has been saying that Iran cannot enrich any uranium. Now, that sounds like an opening position because it is, in fact, misaligned with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran signed, whereby they have the right to enrich at around a 3% level. I suspect that is what they can give them in return for the many things they will demand. And that will enable the Iranians to walk away with the appearance, or at least some narrative, however flimsy, of having gotten what they want in theory.
Well, I hope you're right about there's a deal to be made now, showing a graphic of U.S. troops in the Middle East underneath the two of us right now. And I'll pop up another one here from the tablet, and that's the economic concerns that a lot of people have going into the new week when it comes to the price of oil and all the oil that moves here through the Strait of Hormuz. There's been a lot of speculation, Dan, about whether Iran might move to close that strait down. Of course, it would hurt them probably more than anybody else. Any thoughts on the probability of something like that?
It would be tantamount to a declaration of war, but one that doesn't involve deadly violence. I don't think the world can tolerate closing of the Straits of Hormuz for more than a very, very limited period. A fifth of the world's oil or more goes through there, and it affects, of course, Iran itself to the degree that they can export oil given the sanctions, but also and especially Iraq, Kuwait, the other Gulf countries, to a degree Saudi Arabia. It's not tolerable. It's a threat they can make. The fact that they're making it actually shows how limited is their menu of options. They don't control their own skies. A little bit, very embarrassingly for them, if their officials fly out to negotiations in these coming days in Moscow or Europe or elsewhere, they would be doing so at the pleasure of Israel that controls their airspace. There are militias around the region, the ones I'm saying have to be defanged and basically ended, still somewhat exist, but they've been badly degraded during the war that Iran instigated. Israel at least believes that Hamas would never have attacked on October 7th, 2023, that started this entire chain reaction. Without acquiescence from Iran. Iran certainly funds and supports Hamas, and we see that probably was a strategic error by Iran because their entire ring of fire around Israel has been very seriously degraded as a consequence.
Let me pick up on your points, though, about negotiations. So, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was on TV earlier today talking about the U.S. still having a desire, even after this, to negotiate. It sounds like that's your point as well, that we might be closer than ever.
I think that negotiation is what Trump wants, and Israel can't go against what the U.S. Asked to do. And Israel has also been hinting in recent hours that they will soon basically finish their bank of targets that they feel they have to get. And that largely has to do, I think, with the missile launchers. So Israel and the U.S., I think, will be prepared to call it a day fairly quickly. The U.S. has no immediate plans to continue any military activity at all. We talk about the two branches of the MAGA movement. You have the isolationists like J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, but you also have the interventionists, maybe Marco Rubio and others, maybe Hegseth, certainly Ted Cruz. But, you know, even though Trump was elected to end forever wars, that doesn't mean that the U.S. has to be, completely inactive on a global stage and not act against threats, which is why we see all the American spokespersons speaking very clearly about a limited precision surgical strike that is meant to compel a return to negotiation and not a forever war. Now, I suspect also that if Iran plays its cards wrongly in the days ahead and the Americans have to go back and strike at more targets, again, it will not be boots on the ground and, an invasion of Iran that could end up being a 10-year affair the way things went in Afghanistan and Iraq. It would be something else. It would be probably attacking key assets of the regime, perhaps some elements of the economical infrastructure of Iran with the goal of not only getting Iran to desist, whatever it's doing, but also encourage elements of the security establishment in Iran to do a palace coup, because that is the most likely way that we can enter a phase one of a collapse of the Islamic Republic.
All right, Dan, as always, we thank you for your experience and perspective in covering this region for so long, live from Tel Aviv.